Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Paul.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't see anybody, but I guess that's okay. Do you see a screen? I'm going to go ahead and um, put my screen up.
Yeah, that's up, Paul.
Okay. Right, I don't see myself, but I'm going to just let you guide me. Now, Samuel, if you speak to me during the presentation, which I would encourage, or I can speak to you, right? So I guess the audience will hear us speak, our conversation.
Yeah, folks can hear you, Paul.
Okay, and so they'll hear you as well.
When I unmute, yes.
Right. So what I'm a little concerned about is not being able to see Jean.
It doesn't look like Jean is on yet.
Right. So if I can't see her, I will let you manage that.
Okay.
Oh, it says change presenter. Maybe that's all it is. No, that's not it. Can you can handle the change presenter portion, Samuel?
Hey, Paul, can you mute real quick and call me on Teams, please?
How are we doing? Do you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Paul.
Okay. And you can see me, but I can't see you.
No, your camera's not on, Paul.
Oh, there I am. Can't really shrink it. Okay. I'll leave it like this. Samuel, what's the status with getting Jean in?
Jean is in right now, figuring out how to get her in as a presenter.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna let you let me know when we should start. Folks, if you're out there, we're working on getting organized, so I appreciate your patience.
Well, it looks like Gene is in now, if you want to get
Great.
started.
Okay. Jean, do you hear me? Can you speak back or so? Well, I think we have some time to work that out. What do you think, Samuel?
It looks like Gene's microphone might not be connected, Paul. Let me
Okay.
figure something out with her.
If you have just joined, thanks for your patience. We're getting organized. We're going to start very shortly. Just let me know, Samuel, and we'll go ahead and start. Just I'll let you figure this out.
Gene, it looks like you got your microphone working. Can you confirm?
Yes.
Okay, great, Jean. Then you I think you can turn it back off, but once we get to your session, then go ahead and turn it back on, and I'll guide you on that.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know how to turn it off. I usually have a mute button.
Gene, I'll mute you for now.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, Paul, take it away.
Okay, great. I hope you can see me and hear me well. Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Lum with the American Farmland Trust, California region. I'm the California project manager, and I thank you for your attendance and interest in your programs. Thank you for your patience getting started. This is our first webinar using GoTo platform, and hopefully it will go well. And thanks for braving the winds. In my region, we're actually under rolling blackout warning. So to continue with us today is our guest speaker, Gina Coulier of Merced County. Jean and her family own an almond orchard, and of which her son-in-law, Ralph Souter, is the farmer. Jean is also the president of the East Merced Resource Conservation District. And with us is Samuel Madrigal of the American Farmland Trust, California region. Samuel will manage the technical aspects of the webinar, especially the chat box and Q&As. During the presentations, feel free to enter questions in the Q&A box. And at the end of each session, we will address questions. We'll use the chat box for internal use and information. We will be taking a 10-minute break around 9:50, it might be earlier, and we'll finish the webinar no later than 11 o'clock. So for our webinar today, I'll talk about soil health case studies that American Farmland Trust has published and how the case studies can be of value to you and the growers you work with. Gina Coulier and her son-in-law Ralph participated in our first case study, and Jean will talk about her family's farming practices and how those practices have benefited soil health. And Jean might be able to speak to how we connected with Jean's family and began the case study process, and how that case study has benefited her. We will, after I speak, Jean will speak, and we'll take our break. And then we're going to describe an economic method. It's an analysis method, the NRCS level 3 T-chart that can be used to evaluate costs and benefits from changing farming practices. The T-chart method is a way to learn if changes in farming practices can be beneficial or unprofitable. And for our final session, I'll talk about writing a case study. This could be valuable for you to help growers that you work with to determine if there's profit potential in practicing in soil health practices, and whether there's environmental impact to adopting and changing practices to improve soil health, and consider marketing opportunities. So in sum, we hope the combined instruction today is informative and provides an opportunity for you to help growers become more successful. The goal of our 4-part training is to increase farm adoption of healthy soils practices by providing evidence of economic benefit. By training ag professionals on cost benefit tools a little bit later today, such as the T-chart, and on environmental assessment tools, such as the nutrient tracking tool and Comet Planner or Comet Farm. We hope that ag professionals such as yourself will encourage farmers that you work with to adopt one or more practices that improve soil health. Our work is supported by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, USDA, through a grant with the Western Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program. That's Western SARE. So this is our webinar schedule. The 4-part series. And so our next webinar will be on November 4th. And we're going to focus on environmental tools, November 19th, focusing on wine grape growers and wine grape ag professionals, and December 1st, focusing on wine grapes as well, on the environmental methods. In January, we're going to resume a webinar series. We're going to train on the American Farmland Trust partial budget analysis, which is a deeper dive into cost benefit analysis. And we're going to train on Comet Farm. That's the environmental tool. It's a little bit more detailed than Comet Planner. So those dates in January will be announced soon, next month at some time. American Farmland Trust was founded in 1980, and our mission is to protect farmland, promote environmentally sound farming practices, and keep farmers on the land. Here's today's agenda, and note we'll be taking a 10-minute break in between the 2 early sessions and the 2 later sessions. I have it down at 9:50, but it may be earlier. You know, I will just we'll take the break when we get there. And our Q&A sessions will be held at the end of each talk. So we're certainly going to allow time to answer questions. So why quantify soil health outcomes? We know there's scientific evidence that farm practices such as cover crops, nutrient management, compost applications improve soil health. and water quality. But there's not much information out there about the economic benefits or net profit potential from soil health. And farmers want to know the bottom line. So our case study project goal is to scale up farming practices that improve soil health. We want to provide tangible evidence of benefits to healthy soils. We want to promote the case studies to increase awareness. And we are publishing a user-friendly 2-page compelling document. It's informational. It's like a handout that tells the story of a grower who has successfully adopted soil health practices. And we disseminate those case studies to encourage farmers to adopt the practices and to gain awareness in the community that practices that improve soil health are worthwhile. Get back to the slide. AFT has published 8 case studies across the US. So the case studies are developed and authored by AFT staff and reviewed by economists and specialists from NRCS, USDA, and Colorado State. They're co-branded with NRCS, and across the country, the case studies have assessed corn and soybean rotations in Ohio and Illinois, and diversified crops in New York. Some of these other case studies across the country have also evaluated livestock rotations on the farm management scheme. In California, 2 case studies have been published evaluating almond orchards in Merced County and Madera County. AFT focused on the northern San Joaquin Valley with consideration of the farming challenges among growers there with groundwater concerns, lowering water tables, sigma issues, which may result in a loss of productive farmland. So by disseminating the information, providing evidence that soil health practices, get back there. Soil health practices improve soil water retention, water infiltration. We hope some growers report that they can decrease their water application or skip the first irrigation in the spring due to winter water retention in the soil, or perhaps skip the last irrigation before harvest. These are irrigation savings that eventually may improve or mitigate for the water table and groundwater conditions in that part of our state. The case study objectives, we use methods to quantify the impacts from the soil health farming practices. For economic outcomes, I'm talking about the wrong slide here. So for the California case studies, 4 farming practices are assessed. Nutrient management, referring to fertilizer application based on leaf and soil sampling. We encourage leaf sampling throughout the year. Soil sampling is typically done annually. We encourage annual instead of, say, for instance, biannual or every 3 or 4 years. Going to fertigation, which is evidence that it's much more efficient, and targeted fertilizer applications, referring to using efficient fertilizer formulations, meeting the crop demand, focusing on minimizing nitrate leaching and over application. Other other practices include conservation cover, and with almonds that could be cover crop seed planting or maintaining resident vegetation, compost application, and mulching of annual prunings. So we are not necessarily advocating a combined effort. We hope that growers try a practice or two, learn from it. We realize it takes years to build soil health, and some of the growers that we work with are combining all four practices. And but we can work with a grower, provide technical advice for a grower trying one practice and considering another or adding another. Case study objectives. We use quantitative methods to determine the impacts from healthy soils farming practices. For economic outcomes, we are using NRCS T-charts or the American Farmland Trust partial budget analysis. For water quality impacts, we're using USDA's nutrient tracking tool, and climate impacts, USDA's Comet Farm tool. The next step in developing a case study, we identify farmers who have successfully adopted soil health practices and are willing to share their experience. We interview them, prepare the case studies. Again, it's a 2-page user-friendly human interest story. We have those case studies reviewed by NRCS to verify and confirm that we've used the methods correctly and entered data and make sure the calculations and findings are correct. Disseminate the case studies to growers, ag professionals, and the general public. We hope to scale up awareness among farmers and the ag community and demonstrate that there are benefits to building soil health and potentially positive net returns. So note, our work is not scientifically replicated research. We don't measure a number of soil parameters. We do record soil organic matter percentage over time. But our aim is to tell the story of a grower's experience with improving soil health and conveying his or her approaches to farming and stewardship. And we use the tools to assess benefit to the grower's bottom line and estimate impact to water quality and greenhouse gas emissions. We recognize it takes years to build up soil, and each farmer has different soil types, equipment, budgets, management approaches. So each grower is going to have different results from adopting soil health practices, but we hope our case studies raise awareness, and it's another way to put information out there from another farmer, and hopefully we can make a positive contribution. Hopefully the farmer can see a positive contribution to net returns in the environment by adapting one or two of the practices or more. So when we looked at the 2 case studies, the overarching findings for the 2 almond orchards, we found an average yield increase of 15% attributable to soil health practices over a 12-year period since the soil health practices were adopted. The growers made best guesstimates when attributing yield increase, and with consideration to variables in almond production or any type of crop production with perennial crops. You know as well as anybody, annual weather conditions affect production from year to year and during the growing season. And the growers considered annual variations in disease and insect pressure. Both orchards were full bearing when the soil health practices were implemented, and that gives us a solid baseline where we don't have to discount the fact that that yields are increasing over the years due to maturity. So by making those best guesstimates, we found the average change in net income was $824 per acre over the 12-year period, meaning that the baseline 12 years ago, the grower was making XYZ per acre, and currently that amount per acre in net income has increased by $824. The value is adjusted for inflation and for market prices. Environmental assessment, the water quality improvement for each farm was different. And for Ralph Souder of Vicoulier Farms, we found a 98% reduction in nitrogen losses over the, I think for Souder, it was a, well, 12-year period, 10-year period, and I'm sorry, 14-year period. And Comet Farm estimated greenhouse gas emissions reduced by 16% over that period. So we will, going back to that slide, we will introduce the nutrient tracking tool and Comet Planner at our next session on November 4th. We consider the grower inputs to develop the case study. We will ask the grower what his costs were and make that comparison between costs from the baseline period, for instance, 14 years ago, and now. And that could include, depending on the farm, equipment changes, herbicide changes, fertilizer increases or decreases, for almonds especially, miticide, fungicide, for tree crops, again, compost, irrigation costs, pollination, etc. So for our case study with Ralph Souder, he adopted healthy soils practices starting 2004 and adopted the 4 practices that we assess when we do a case study: nutrient management, conservation cover, mulching, and compost application. He probably adopted those practices over a period of a few years. Study area was all 116 acres of his farm at the time, and I believe that that Ralph is farming more acres now. So the findings, again, annual change in total net income, 76,000. Annual change in per acre net income, $657 per acre over a 14-year period since the dates of soil health adoption. So Ralph says, I'm a firm believer that these practices made my trees and soils healthier. And another note about these case studies, and as I mentioned, it is a human interest story as well. And we include background information about Ralph and the family, a history about his family's farm, and some of those tidbits are, I think farmers can relate to, that we're assessing the experience from a fellow farmer, and in many cases, a fellow farmer growing the same crop in the same area. The case study, we illustrate the economic effect using the AFT partial budget analysis method. And that analysis is on page 2. And you can see the net result on the bottom, and you can see the the changes over the 14-year period in income on the left, cost decreases on the left column, and changes in cost on the right. So you can see that Ralph was able to save on herbicides after switching to conservation cover, and we found a reduction. I'm sorry, basic positive effects on the left and negative effects on the right. Environmental benefit stated in the case study from our use of the nutrient tracking tool and Comet Farm. We were able to show the reduction in nitrogen losses and greenhouse gas emissions. The lower left is the home page for USDA's nutrient tracking tool. And again, we're going to introduce that to you on November 4th. And the Comet Farm tool, USDA homepage. So those are the information and ways to use those methods. And we're going to introduce Comet Planner, which is related to Comet Farm. It's a more basic method, easier to use, and we'll talk about that also on November 4th. So how can ag professionals benefit from these case studies? We hope that you can help growers that you work with by sharing the case studies to demonstrate grower examples of soil health success and show the quantitative examples from the 2 growers that adopted soil health practices. We hope you and your growers encourage on-farm adoption among farmers and the ag community. How can growers use the case studies? Growers have an opportunity to read about the experience of their peers. Many might know the growers that we evaluated. The case studies provide evidence of soil health success from 2 growers. It allows growers to advocate healthy soils practices with their landowners, crop buyers, bankers, and it may potentially provide marketing opportunities. In sum, the case study it's a grower story with their experience implementing practices to improve soil health. It allows us to share the grower's approach and philosophy towards sustainable farming and good stewardship. And we hope to publish more case studies in the future. And we are working with several wine grape growers to publish grower profiles. We are also collaborating with other agencies on soil health projects, such as RCDs, NRCS, and we're staying connected with University Extension and crop researchers and nonprofits. An example is CAF. We stay connected with CalCan. We try to stay updated with ag research and ag outreach. That's being done to further our goals to scale up adoption of sound farming practices. Well, thank you for listening to us and to me about our case study work and our goals to share stories and evidence that healthy soils, building healthy soils can be beneficial to the grower as well as the environment. And next, we're going to have Gina Coyer speak about her family's experience with the farming practices that they've implemented with consideration to soil health. And Jean might be able to touch on her family's experience helping us develop the case study.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Shall I start?
Samuel, shall we
Yeah,
let
go
her
ahead,
start? Great.
Okay. You know, Paul, I really liked your message so far. You talk about the bottom line, and this is it's always about the bottom line with us farmers. You know, we've got to make money doing it, or we will be not in business. Also, education, 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 and I think this is really, really important, and that's what helped us in our farm so much, I think. So Ralph, when he came into the picture, he was about 38 years old. When I first started, many years before that, I was 40 years old. Neither one of us had been from a farming background, but we were very much attached to the land, and it felt good to be productive. He kept very good records, probably a lot better than I did. I started out with solid set sprinklers in 1980. I managed the ranch pretty much myself because my husband was ill when we moved to the farm. The farm's been in the family since 1907. Japanese Americans came, started this colony here where I live. So that's 113 years we've had this farm in our family. And we know how hard they worked to make it successful, almost lost it a couple of times. So I felt, well, first thing I've got to do is get more educated. I didn't do anything. Somebody said I was going from WZ to dust because I used to teach piano. And it was quite a change. But I think one of the main things is to be able to educate people, and for us farmers to listen to people. So I took a class in 1983, 3-unit class at Merced College. Maxwell Norton was a farm advisor with UC Extension, new to the job, I think, and he had a great class on orchard and vineyard management. And that probably saved my life, that and having other farmers around in my community that helped come over and figure out how to move things. We started our farming not having any background and not having anybody on the farm because there was a sudden death, and there was no one. There was only one person running the farm. So we had to go through a lot, $200,000 inheritance on 80-acre farm. The house had not been painted since 1920 when it was built. I used 300 fuses because it had a 15-amp fuse downstairs and one upstairs on 3,400 square foot. So it was a real challenge getting this farm going and keeping it going. But we worked hard. We did it as a family, and I just reached out. So I think it's really important that we try to reach out to farmers and educate them. When I first came, we used UN 32, and at that time, almonds were supposed to be pruned 25% every year. So we took these old trees, which were probably close to a cord of wood, and we started pruning them. And it was the worst thing we could have done because they didn't have any support. They had not been pruned that way. And so we ended up pruning twice, I think, the first year, and we had so many big branches down. It was terrible. We watered with pulling hoses. Every other row, we had a hose for 4 rows we'd cover, and then every 24 hours we'd have to move it. So it was, I think I had 126 hoses we had to pull every time we irrigated. I ended up putting it in solid set so that I could manage the irrigation because we didn't have money to pay for labor. And so we just did this as a family project to survive. But I think going to different workshops, as people maybe, I'm sure getting information that Paul is giving you on this workshop, getting involved. I joined the Farm Bureau. I got very involved with other farmers. We looked at the American Farmland Trust. They had a report on paving over paradise, and we used that so much to educate people, such as when we did the general plan update. People started paving over the farmland, and we could see all of the influence from the Bay Area, people wanting to move over here where land was cheap. And I would find it harder and harder to farm with all the traffic. Wow, we've got to save the farmland. So we started, a few of us farmers started nonprofit Valley Land Alliance, which is still going, and we're still making comments trying to save farmland. And our mission was to educate, to save farmland. So getting back to what Ralph did in the study, as I say, we started out with UN 32, and I had soils, tests of the soil and tests of the leaves, and I could see there was nutrition in the ground, but the trees weren't picking it up. And then I had a neighbor, actually it was a woman, who really influenced me, so because she had a real good crop. The 80s were bad years for us and many farmers with almonds. I asked her what she did. Well, she put a lot of, we used manure at that time. So she put a lot of manure on, and she banded the potassium, and it's quite a few pounds per tree. And I thought, wow. So I put manure on first couple of years, and then I had these little things coming up out of the ground. I thought, what's causing this dirt to come up? And I asked somebody, and it was earthworms. Before that, I didn't even have any earthworms. And I thought, wow. So I realized that the soil must be healthier because it had earthworms. So we changed, to using a lot more manure and then compost. About that time, there was problems with salmonella with some almonds that were found, and so we got away from manure, went to compost. But I am a firm believer in that, and Ralph today feels that it's so important to use compost. In fact, he said 23% of the almonds are nuts that are pulled out of the ground. When we load a truck with to have it sent into the huller and sheller, he says 23% is nuts, but that you take out of the orchard. But there's also a lot of the other stuff that goes in. We have the hulls, we have the shells, we have sticks, we have some leaves. So there's a lot of organic we're taking out of the soil. And a lot of people, I don't think, realize that we're taking so much out, we're destroying our soils. That's one reason I got involved with the Resource Conservation District. And now we're emphasizing healthy soils. So it's composting, extremely important, extremely important. Another thing which happened as soon as Ralph joined the farm here, he was, I think I said he was 38 years old. He was an engineer in Europe, and he really likes to grow things. And so we farmed, I showed him what I did for about a year and then let him pretty well take over. But I had everything replanted. I do blocks, like 12 to 15 acres a block. And as I say, I put in solid set sprinklers because I could manage that. And with a drip, it takes more time to go through the orchards, and you get the holes, well, the earwigs were bad at that time, and they'd lay eggs in them. So anyway, first thing he did was take that last block that I had that wasn't irrigated, didn't have an irrigation system yet, and he decided, well, we've got to go with drip or misters. And so he put that in, and then he started doing fertigation so he could manage his nutrients, and that saved a lot on expenses and water also. So instead of watering the entire orchard as I was doing, he watered where the trees are, and that's of course where the roots are going to grow. So when he puts in, he does things with fertigation, that's putting the nutrients in with the water. But the compost, he puts closer to the trees. He doesn't spread it all over the entire orchard. And I think that he feels that's really important to do that. We've done chipping, and we have 9 acres left of one of the old orchards that need to be planted. And we're going to probably pay, it looks like it's going to cost the following: $650 to grind up the orchard. This is per acre, and $250 to spread the chips. So that's $900 an acre. And you can apply for Air Resource Board for grants. $650 if you spread it out is what they're paying, he was told. That's $650 an acre. So it's only costing him $250 an acre, and you're getting a lot of that organic material it talked about. He's done the cover crops. We use we have the just whatever comes up, the grasses and whatever comes up. However, we have in the past done cover crops. I did crimson clover, which was beautiful. People used to stop and take pictures of it. That's real pretty flower, and clover is good for a cover crop. We've also, where I had that one last area of solid set sprinklers, he was able to put in, I think it's an NRCS, an organization that's sponsored, I think, by the Almond Board. We got free seeds, and so he planted 17 acres. At that time, we had 17 still in solid set. And with that, right after we'd harvest almonds, we could put in these seeds and we could water them in because we had water over the whole area. So that's one problem with cover crops if you want to plant something. And he was raising bees at the time, and it was always a problem keeping the bees over the winter, you know, having nutrition for them. So with this, he was able to have something that would bloom earlier before the almonds bloomed. And that worked very well. And it was great. We could harvest, I even found some broccoli plants. I don't know where the seeds came from, but anyway, broccoli, but we had the daikon. It's the Japanese long radish. I'd go out there and pick that out. The cover crop, I think the canola grew 6 feet tall. It was beautiful. And it was great because the bees had food. So, but it's harder now because we don't have any solid set sprinklers left. So I don't know what else. I could talk about the compost a little bit, maybe. The type of compost he uses now is livestock, chicken and dairies. And of course, you know, thinking about the bottom line, you want to get something that's as local as you can, and you know, what's available in your area. I think that's about all I have to say, and maybe I run out of time anyway or talk too much. So if you have any questions.
Anybody out there, feel free to ask Jean. This is your shot at it.
Well, I'd just like to say that, you know, in closing, that it is the bottom line, and we have so much concern now about water, and we've got to find ways to not take it out of the ground where we can't replenish it. And I think working together and becoming more educated so we can educate others, and working together, we can find solutions. And also that bottom line, that's what we farmers are all looking for. We'll improve that. Thank you.
Jean, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am curious if you recall how American Farmland Trust connected with you and Ralph to begin the case study, because it is the first case study for California. So how did that, and I had my previous coworker, Justin Bodell, that started that project. How did that all come about?
Well, as I mentioned, Paving Over Paradise was one of the guides that I used in talking to many people. And American Farmland Trust is you know, very concerned about saving farmland, as I am and a lot of our farmers are. And so we connected at many different meetings, I think. Because I'm on the Resource Conservation District Board, I've gotten hedgerow funding through NRCS. Ralph has gotten funding through them. I think Justin saw me or became more familiar with me. I was president of the Farm Bureau too from Merced County, maybe that. You know, just exposure and just reaching out. And I think he saw that I was trying to, you know, solve problems like he is trying to solve, you are trying to solve now, and to help others. And because I had taken advantage of some of these opportunities, and I was able to save this farm, not single-handedly, but I should say we. I think he felt that because I had hedgerows, I'd had the cover crops, then he met Ralph, came onto the property and met Ralph, and realized that Ralph was very good with keeping figures. He's, I guess, because of his past managing a company, as an engineer, he was very, very efficient in keeping figures. And that's probably really important too for everybody to know. And that's something I learned in Maxwell Norton's class back in the 80s. You've got to really pencil it out. You got to know, your income and your expenses, and spray at the right time, do things efficiently. And I think he saw that in Ralph and realized that Ralph had information, documented information. I didn't have that as much, but Ralph has. So Ralph has been here for 15 years. Justin, we've been on, I get on webinars, I attend different meetings, and I've seen him different places. I think he's gone to the California Resource Conservation District conferences, and I think we're I'm trying to do what is best to make this not just productive and find the bottom line for 1 year, but for my children, my grandchildren. They say, Indian saying is, you shouldn't do anything to your land that's going to affect the 7th generation down the road. And I think that this is something we need to always think about. It's not just what we're taking out right now at the moment. And that's one reason we've gotten such a problem with water. We've taken water out of the ground in those deep aquifers below the Corcoran layer, and that water will never go back in. So we cannot destroy our soils and our land. And I think that's why there's such an effort to improve the soils. I'm not organic. We had a BIOS program in the late 80s. We had 2 brothers. One was conventional farmer and the other one was organic farmer. It was Glenn Anderson and his brother. And the UC Extension, Lonnie Hendricks was a farm advisor then, I think. They did a study over several years, and they realized that the person that was doing the organic farming really came out the best. The conventional farmer was not as productive. So we get back to that bottom line. So I really feel that the more we can learn and we can teach others about the importance of healthy soils and water, and you think about how much water is saved when you have healthy soils. We're doing carbon farming now, plans, and you're going to get into that, I think, in your next session. But I think getting that back into the ground, the carbon, we keep this balance, it's very important. Of course, all of our fires now, we've got such a problem, but we've got to manage our land and have healthy soils if we want to make it work out for us today and for the future generations.
Thank you, Jean.
I talk too much, maybe.
Jean and Paul, there's a few
No.
questions here. I think this one is probably for Jean. It's asking, what type of cover crops are you using now that your blocks don't use solid set irrigation?
We use it's just whatever comes up. It's whatever's there, and so we don't spray it down the middles. I think Ralph did once this last year because of one particular problem but whatever comes up is what's used now, because we don't have any irrigation like I had with the solid sets. But we mow it, we keep it pretty late in the spring or early summer.
And here's another question for you, Jean. Someone's asking what the typical cost on compost per acre is.
The cost for what?
Compost per acre.
I'm not sure what he's paying now. Sorry, I can't answer that, but maybe Paul, do you know?
Well, I know some averages.
Yeah, I think you have to average.
Right, 4 to 5 tons an acre composted cow manure plus spreading. The range might be 120 an acre to 160. No, it's difficult to access depending on the location where you are in the state. If you're near dairies that compost, or if you're near, facilities that provide that or sell it. So that's a factor. So I know of growers that spend in that range, 120 to 150 per acre.
Thanks, Paul.
Right. I'm not breaking it down, per ton, but that's a rough figure.
And we got another question. Go ahead, Jane.
It really does depend where you are. See, we have Foster Farms chickens in Merced County and Stanislaus around me. So, and then we have a lot of dairies. So price would be lower for trip shipping, particularly, I'm sorry, go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah, there was another question for you on cover crops. Someone is asking, when did they flower, and do you know which species were flowering? And there's a second part to that question also.
Well, with the planting of the 17 acres where I had the solid set, that was for bees, and there were I think there were basically 4 different things, and canola was one of them. They had that, I told you, the dicone radish, so different radishes. Paul, you may have some other information on that, but that was they flowered. We planted. We put those seeds in as soon as we harvested them, and so it was in October, and by December, end of December, they were up quite high, but then we could water them because we often don't get rains until later. So they're almost all yellow flowers, by the way, but they were flowering the end of December until we had to cut them down, before with bloom time, February. So it provided the flowers for the bees in the wintertime. It was a real good thing to do, I think. But you have to have the water, guaranteed water.
Yeah, so that's a good transition into the next part of that question. Was they were asking if you've gotten enough rainfall to grow the planted cover crops.
No, and it's not just the rainfall, it's when it comes, how much of it is when it comes. You could possibly, my son-in-law was saying, you could put something in the spring, possibly, if you had, if you have rains, because we often get rains late winter and in spring. So that could be a possibility, but he doesn't plant it in the spring. So we just rely on what comes up. He encourages the clover, and we see more clover come up when he can leave it so it can seed. I guess I don't know what the cycle is, but I have noticed that, and the clover is good to have. But we don't plant anything. We just depend on the rains, and it's hard. It's hard, especially like this year. It looks like we won't have rain for a while, and by the time you get something up, you have to be careful that you don't have a lot of grass or cover crop when it comes frost season or frost time. Of course, our weather is changing. It seems like we don't have those severe frosts like we used to have, but so you have to get it down low. You want to have if you have anything on the ground, you want to have it mowed down by frost time.
And then here's another question. This one might be for Paul based on the case studies, but they're asking, how do you figure out the nitrogen availability and adjust fertilizer to the mineralized nitrogen from organic matter?
Well, that is not really something that we will measure. Of course, the nutrient cycling. There is the gradual change in the nitrogen cycle. nitrate change to availability of the plants. But it's not really our arena to figure that out. I think there are a lot of crop consultants and researchers and dealers that have that information. So I could point you out or point you in the right direction, but unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that very well. Right. Thank you, though, for the question.
We do have one last question, and also I'll just add, one of our colleagues mentioned that in our case studies, the report on cost per acre for compost is $130. And the last question that someone is asking, I believe it's for Jean. They're asking, do you sample manure before applying it to avoid manure with high nitrates? And where would you go to sample?
You know, I'd have to ask Ralph, and he's not here, so I can't. I don't do that personally, so I can't tell you, but I can get we can get that information back to you, I'm sure, as a follow-up, right, Paul?
Right, we sure can. And lastly, I have something, and Samuel, maybe you're going in this direction. The audience would like to see you, Eugene. They'd like to see your face for a moment. Is that possible?
I don't know. It might break the screen.
Am I pushing you on that one?
That's fine. So
let us know, or let me know.
And it's not a young one.
Okay. Right. Great.
It's not a young one. When you know I came here in 1980 and I was 40 years old, so you know how old I am. But I'm still very active. I'm still out there fighting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jean. It was great to hear your experience and your stories, and you know, your passion to sustainable farming, stewardship, building soil health. And I want a housekeeping note. Today's webinar is recorded and should be available for future reference. But again, Jean, I can't thank you enough. Really good to hear, to hear your experiences. We're going to take a 10-minute break now, and we'll come back and talk about economic methods.
Paul, can I add one more thing?
Back. Yes, at 10:10. Go ahead, Jean.
I know I talk too much, but you know, that 2018 study of yours, I don't have it in front of me, the strategic, you know, when I said study, I mean, about land use. I really think that is something that people need to look at and promote more. If you can somehow share that with your people.
Okay.
Actually,
it is,
with
for American Farmland Trust. It's our focus. It's our priority, and we're fully committed and dedicated to that. You know, preserving productive farmland. Okay.
So if you could share it, that'd be great. Thanks. Thank you all for coming.
All right. Thank you. We'll be back at 10:13 and enter questions in the Q&A. I didn't address any additional Q&As yet, so we'll address that later. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Jean.
Others.